What's a leasehold? What is a freehold? What's the difference between a leasehold and a freehold? I get asked this question a lot. And as someone who grew up in the States, I've got to be honest with you. When I first moved to England and I was getting into mortgages, I had difficulty understanding the whole idea of leasehold. So today we're going to talk through it. Make sure that you watch until the end because I'll be talking about upcoming legislation and should you extend your leasehold and how to do that. So when you buy a leasehold property, you don't own it outright forever. You're essentially purchasing the right to live in and use the property for a set number of years. And I'll be going through short leases and what those timeframes usually are. The land and building remain owned by the freeholder or the landlord. And as the years on the lease count down, the property value and the mortgageability are affected. That's another thing I'll be looking at, what lenders are looking for remortgages and mortgages on leasehold properties, including what a short lease is. Leasehold ownership is common in the UK, particularly with flats. So today we're going to be talking about leasehold properties and explaining what a leasehold is. Parliament. My name is Anthony Lindsay, and I've been in finance for over 30 years. So when you hear me talk, I'm coming from a perspective of someone who has done lending, wealth management, and collections. I'm here to give you information, unpack the things that people ask me about. I'm not here to give legal advice, tax advice, or financial advice, or to replace speaking to a qualified professional. And remember, your home may be repossessed if you don't keep up the repayments on your mortgage. So, what are the features? What are the things that when someone's talking to you about a leasehold property, what are they talking about? So, first and foremost, they're talking about the length of the lease. So, it's commonly granted for 99, 125, or 999 years, but the clock runs down from day one. So if you think about it, if you get a leasehold property and it has 999 years on it, you probably don't have much to worry about. Ownership split. You own the property during the lease term. The freeholder owns the land and the structure. And this is one of the things that concerns people that are buying leasehold properties because they're like, well, I don't own all of it. So sometimes if you want to make certain changes to the property, you need to get permission from the leaseholder. So those are the restrictions. Leaseholders must comply with conditions set out in the lease. Example, no alterations without consent. So if you want to do certain things, as I said, to the property, you're going to need to get consent. And people don't like asking for permission for things. People feel like, well, I've purchased this property in theory. Although it's a leasehold, if I want to do some renovations, I should be able to just do that. But that's one of the features of a leasehold, which is what puts some people off. Leasehold versus freehold. One of the things that you want to think about is when you're buying a property, is it a freehold or is it a leasehold? If it is a leasehold, what is the difference? One of the most important distinctions in the UK property ownership is whether the property is leasehold or freehold. A lot of people don't understand what the difference is or potentially what a leasehold property is. That's why we're having this conversation. The type of ownership affects not only your rights, but the responsibilities, the costs, and even the property's future value. Understanding the difference helps buyers avoid surprises and make informed decisions. So if you're buying a home that has what they consider a short lease, so that might be 80 years or less, or just something that you might feel is a short lease, 100 years or something like that, you have to take into account what lenders will lend to you, and also what happens as the lease term gets shorter and shorter. Because the shorter the lease term, it can devalue that property. So, one of the reasons why I decided to have this conversation is because over the last couple of weeks, I've been helping a lot of clients that are in this predicament, either buying a property that has a property that they feel is a short lease, or they have a property that has a short lease and they're trying to remortgage. And they've struggled, particularly if they go directly to the lender. As I always say, always work with a mortgage broker. The mortgage broker is going to be able to find the lender that can meet the specifications that you need met. They're not going to just say no. They're going to find the lender who can actually help you. So that's leasehold versus freehold. The freehold, and these are some of the features of the leasehold versus the freehold. The freehold, you own both the property and the land. It stands on indefinitely with full control. So you own both the land and the property. With a leasehold, you own the property only for the length of time of the lease, while the land remains with the freeholder. If we look at some of the market patterns, most houses in England and Wales are freehold. So it's very rare that I come across a client who's purchasing a house that is a leasehold, but it does exist. While most flats are leasehold, with some exceptions, such as new build houses sold as leasehold. Key trade-offs. Leasehold means less control and ongoing cost, whereas freehold offers more autonomy, but often requires a higher upfront purchase price. So in simple language, the freehold is going to give you more freedom, more options, better retained value. Therefore, in most cases, it's going to cost more. So that's a quick overview of leasehold versus freehold. Pending changes to the law. So there's some pending changes, which puts people in a little bit of a position because they're like, well, there could be some changes that might make it less expensive for me to extend a short lease. Should I do it now? Should I wait? What changes are pending? So leasehold ownership has long been criticized for being outdated and unfair to homeowners. That criticism is often reflective of which side of this equation you're on. So if you're the freeholder, you're good, because especially as people approach you to extend that lease and you're going to get part of that marriage value, that's a win for you. But if you are the leaseholder, or if you're some of these people that need to extend it and they know that they're going to be spending money, it's not so good. So in response, the government has announced reforms aimed at making the system more transparent, affordable, and consumer friendly. While many of these proposals are still in progress, they could significantly reshape how leasehold properties are bought, sold, and extended in the future. So on both sides of the equation, you have a solid argument. But keep in mind, people like power and people like money. So you have businesses, you have law firms, you have departments that are focused solely on extending leases. So they make money. They keep people employed by being paid to extend leases, and there's a lot of money to be made in there. So obviously, these are the people that are opposing the changes. So you have a lot of groups that are opposing the changes, and a lot of these people do have political power. But there are pending changes. Let's look at some of the pending changes. New build houses. The government has pledged to abolish leasehold on most new houses to prevent unnecessary ground rent. If you search my videos, there will be a video on ground rent. This is something that can cause stress for people when buying a home. So make sure you understand ground rent. So there is a proposal to abolish the leasehold on most new houses. Lease extensions, big thing. This is what we're talking about, lease extensions. Plan reforms aim to make extending leases simpler and more affordable for leaseholders. But keep in mind, if it becomes more simple, there's less money to be made in it. So you do have opposition by some really powerful advocacy groups to prevent this from happening. Shift to common hold. There's a growing discussion about moving towards a common hold system, which gives flat owners collective ownership instead of leases. And it's a work in progress. So if you're considering extending your lease and you're saying, well, should I wait? Should I move ahead? Keep in mind these changes, as of the recording of this video, aren't 100%. They are pending. These reforms are not all law yet, meaning leaseholders must base decisions on current legislation, not future possibilities. So if you're thinking about extending your lease and you're doing your due diligence, you're talking to different law firms and different people that do lease extensions, what you're going to want to consider is how imminent is your leasehold into slipping into being the definition of a short lease. So that would be 80 years or less. So how imminent that is that? Are you planning on remortgaging in the near future? You have to weigh all these things in. If you are at 150 years, let's just say you have 150 years left on the lease and you're not looking to remortgage in the next 5 to 6 years, then it might be worth waiting because you have lots of time on the lease. And within the next couple years, if this is going to happen, it will probably happen, which means it could save you tens of thousands of pounds. But conversely, if you're on the other end of it, where you're really at that point, maybe you have 82 years or 81 years, you may want to consider making the changes now, especially if you plan on remortgaging. Should I wait to extend? So that's kind of what I'm alluding to. You have a short lease or something that you consider to be a short lease, and you're wondering, should I extend now? Should I wait based on the pending changes? What should I do? So, deciding when to extend a lease is a crucial financial decision. So, you need the right professionals who aren't there just trying to sell you something and put money in their pocket, but are going to give you the best advice. There's two key people you need. You need a solicitor and you need a mortgage broker. The mortgage broker will understand the criteria. They'll be able to give you the figures behind what the remortgage or mortgage will look like. The solicitor will be able to talk you through the legal costs and get you in touch with the freeholder, etc. Some leaseholders hope that upcoming reforms might make the process cheaper or easier, but waiting comes with risks. I just want to stress, I want to keep saying that these changes aren't 100%. And even if they do get passed, they may take some time to actually go into law. So as time passes, leases get shorter, costs increase, and the property becomes harder to finance or sell. In most cases, acting sooner protects both the value and the flexibility. Do your research. Don't try to cut corners. Don't try to save money that's actually going to end up costing you more money. So, if you're considering, should I extend? Should you wait? Should you move forward? Think about these things. Time is money. Every year that passes reduces the lease length and increases the eventual costs of the extension. So project yourself into the future, 1 year, 2 years. Is that going to be a meaningful difference? When you speak to a mortgage broker, and as I said, I have an active case with this with a client right now. I'm saying, well, you could wait, but this is what it will look like 2 years from now if you don't extend and if this new legislation is not passed. So this person then needs to make a decision based on the downside, because quite often we make our decisions based on best case scenario. So you might say, oh, well, I'm going to wait 2 years because I'm pretty certain that this legislation is going to go through and it's going to save me £30,000. That might be the case. But what if the legislation gets delayed or rewritten? And by delaying, it's actually going to cost you an extra £40,000 if you don't extend now. 80-year threshold. Once the lease falls below 80 years, marriage value applies, making extensions much more expensive because now the freeholder is in an even better leverage position. So it can cost way more. On certain reforms, even if the government changes are introduced, they may not apply retrospectively to existing leases. Caveat, make sure you think about that. It may be that the new laws only apply to new purchases and new leases. So make sure you're speaking to a professional, a solicitor who knows what they're doing. Practical advice, extending sooner rather than later is generally safer, particularly if you plan to sell, remortgage, or release equity. You may just need to bite the bullet. You may need to raise the capital, potentially through a bridging loan, to extend the lease, then remortgage. Then not only have you added value to the property, it's then something that you can put into generational wealth. You can put into your estate planning because it has an extra 300, 400 years on the lease. So make sure that if you're considering extending, you're looking at all of the scenarios. You're not just trying to be cheap and cut corners. You're not having a view that is very short term and very optimistic. As they say, hope for the best, but expect the worst. I've covered off quite a few things. So I've covered off leasehold versus freehold. We've talked about lease extension, should you wait? We've talked about the reform. You will need to speak to a solicitor, and you'll also need to speak to a mortgage broker. I stress to you, it's two completely different disciplines. The solicitor will take care of the legal term, but will not understand lender criteria. You will not go to your bank. Do not go to your bank. Make sure you speak to a broker. This may fall into the specialist lender realm. If you go directly to your bank, and I've been a bank manager at all the big brands, both in the US and the UK, and some of the staff are amazing. But remember, they can only talk to you about their products. Most high street banks tend to cater to the vanilla client. So they don't tend to specialize in situations like short leases or credit issues or the more complex things. Some do, but most don't. So this is why you need to speak to a mortgage broker. So if you're planning a property project and think a bridging loan may be a part of the journey, now's the time to prepare. The reason why I say that is because some people aren't going to have the money that they need in order to extend the lease, especially if it's around that 80-year mark where you're going to have to look at marriage value. So a bridging loan would be the ideal thing. But even if you're just looking to extend a short lease, even if you just want to have the conversation because you're buying a property and the current lease is around 100 years or 110 years, and you're just concerned and you want to understand the impact on mortgaging or remortgaging, make sure that you reach out to me. Book a free consultation, get clear, no pressure answers to your question. The smartest investors gather the right information before they need it. So when the opportunity knocks, they're ready to move. So make sure you reach out to me. My name is Anthony Lindsay. And as I've said, these videos are not to replace speaking to a qualified professional that you know, that you trust, that understands your circumstances. I'm not giving legal advice, tax advice, or financial advice, and your home could be repossessed if you don't keep up the repayments on your mortgage. I offer a free consultation. You do not pay to speak to me. If we don't do anything and I advise you and I explain everything and you decide not to work with me, it doesn't cost you a penny, but you can walk away more informed. If you've liked this video, and even if you haven't, make sure that you subscribe to this video, make sure that you leave comments, and make sure that you share this with anyone who might find it valuable. By subscribing to the video, it tells YouTube that the information that I'm sharing is valuable and it helps get it in front of more people. Remember, your home is something that is probably the most expensive thing that you'll ever purchase. Always do your due diligence, always work with professionals who are honest. And remember, the process is as fast as the slowest person. So you want to find someone who is responsive, someone who will answer your questions, and someone like me who even has evening appointments as well as Saturday appointments. Thanks for watching, and make sure that you like, share, and subscribe.